If the two of you wouldn't mind just giving like a really short introduction about who you are and what you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
so my name is Jamie Scott. I'm the director of the Sparrow's Nest, which is an outreach ministry in the downtown Athens area. And what that generally looks like is for those that struggle up under the poverty level and also those who are in homelessness. And all that we do, we try to do in the name of Jesus Christ, of being the feet and hands of Jesus, just to glorify him and to meet people where they're at in a broken world.
And my name's Bob Bohler, and I'm the pastor at Alps Road Presbyterian Church here in Athens. And I've been here about 20 years at the church, and I've got a couple of boys who are 25 and 23, both graduates from the University of Georgia, and married. And so Jamie and I had the opportunity to write a little book together.
How did the two of you meet?
Well, we met at a little conference that we did together,
Yeah.
and we got to know each other. And so the book came about because we were sitting at lunch in September of 2020, and that was the year, of course, of COVID, when COVID shut things down in March, and the year of the George Floyd death and the racial riots of that summer. So for, I think, both of us and our ministries, had been a year of people talking about race and what do we do and our difficulties there. And so sitting at lunch that day, I said to Jamie, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if a black person and a white person wrote a book together and talked about our different cultural backgrounds and experiences, and did this had conversation about that. So he was up for it, and so we started on the project. It took us about a year to write it, and it turned out to be fascinating, and we just ended up telling our stories. I didn't realize how different our stories were going to be,
Right.
but they turned out to be very different.
And it'd be very parallel in some other ways, right? Even though we're from different cultures, of people, so on and so forth, and with different background statuses of family and things that we talk about in the book. On some things, we begin to see that, man, you know what? We're not really that different, or this different or whatever else. And that started conversation with Bob saying, hey, man, would you and your wife like to have dinner with me and my wife? Got chance to meet Cam, his wife, and invited to speak at their churches on different events. And they have been long-time partners of our ministry, even before me and Bob met at this conference that he was talking about. And they have been such a blessing to us.
Family that drew you back to Athens?
Well, actually, this beautiful lady that I've been involved with for about the last 14 years and married to, my wife, Terry Scott, that's who brought me on back to Athens, that I met when I was back in 1990, when I was like 20 years old or whatever else, and we had a little relationship for about a year and a half, and I wanted to come back this way to slow down some. My mom had a trailer up off in Oglethorpe, and me and her, Terry, crossed paths, man. I kind of told her what I was looking for in life, which is a wife and a few more other things, and the rest is history.
So I grew up in Atlanta. My father went to Georgia Tech on the GI Bill. He was got out of the Second World War, and got married, and we I've got one sister. So I grew up in Atlanta, and we didn't have much money. We were poor, but my father had a job. He was an engineer, and so I came along through high school, and when I got out, I got in Georgia Tech. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do, but I got an engineering degree from there, and so worked 3 years in engineering, and then felt a call to ministry, and went to seminary in Richmond, Virginia. And so while I was there, I had some ministry experiences, part of that training, and ended up have had 3 churches at this point, one in Lakeland, Florida, one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this church in Athens, Georgia. So I came here to be the pastor of the church.
Great. In the creation of the book, remind me, Bob, you were telling me a little bit about the format, how Jamie, you would tell stories from your life, Bob, you would tell stories from your life, and you would kind of put them together. And so in the creation of that, what were some of the more surprising differences and similarities that you found between each other's lives?
Yeah.
First was, let me say this. Bob said, okay, Jamie, what I want you to do, I want you to write your story out,
Yeah.
you know, this and that there. I'll kind of just put the apostrophe or whatever else with it, so on and so forth. And we'll move from there, and we should be through with this if you know at some point in time or whatever else. And I said, okay, cool. He said, can you write? I'm sure you can write, you can spell. I was like, yeah, man, this and that, whatever else, so on and so forth. So I went home, man, I'm praying about it, this and that. I thought I had and did an excellent job. I wrote it, proofread it, this and that. I brought it back to Bob, and Bob was like, you know, in a very kind way, without saying. I said, well, Bob, is it something that you see? Look, man, look, just be straight, open with me or whatever else. He said, Jamie, yeah, I just, go back and write it again. I said, man, this guy, yeah, man, what is he looking for? I write it again, right? None Bob's a writer. He has several books up under his belt. And I bring it back to him, and he said, yeah, Jamie, it's gonna be a little challenge or whatever else. And I said, well, Bob, how about this? They got all kind of technology out there right now, man. Why don't I just record my part and we get it transcribed through one of these little groovy apps or new age apps? And he said, you know what? Let's try that. So that's just a little nugget behind the scene. Thank God for technology and Bob right about now.
So that's what we ended up doing. We sat together and I'd record Jamie and we'd use that. So you think about how you're going to do this. And so I didn't really have any model for what this would look like. And so we had some sections involved. We thought we'd start with family, then we'll start with growing up, then we'll start with family, go to education, we'll talk about work and perspectives on that. We'll talk about racism, we'll talk about America, perspectives on the country. We talk about crime and policing. We thought, that'd be a good thing. Talk about God. So as we started to create this, rather than one long chapter of Jamie's story and one long chapter of my story, we broke each section into a couple of different chapters. I'd tell a little vignette, and Jamie would have one, and so we'd go back and forth. So as it turns out, it really ended up being a really good format because it moves quickly. And so every little chapter is one little segment. And a lot of times for each of the sections, so we've got 9 parts. Each of the parts will have 3 or 4 chapters. So 2 or 3 chapters of kind of the content of our story. And then at the end of that, we take those stories and we sat in here and we said, let's talk about that. Yeah. Let's talk about the differences. Yeah. And I'd say, Jamie, what do you think? What tell me about this more. And Jamie would say, well, what you said this. What do you think about that? Yeah. And so at the end of each of these sections, we've got a little conversation section where we just kind of try to have honest conversation.
That's right. And also,
race and
and on ways of moving forward, which you would say, Bob, we even give that content in the book, which Bob came up with a very brilliant idea of saying, Jamie, the way this thing is crafting itself out, the way that it's moving forward, this really can be used as, in churches, in small groups, just in schools if people want to talk about it, so on and so forth. If the police department want to begin to have some conversation around saying, okay, well, look at this, look at that, so on and so forth. So, I felt that I felt that part and found out that was real meat just in the conversation.
So far, I've used it in the church setting, in a classroom setting, and 8 or 10 weeks of discussion. I can't. So we haven't yet had enough. We'd love to find some more forums to use it in other settings. Yeah. But we've had a lot of folks read it in a lot of different segments. And
have you had any interesting feedback from the people that you shared it with?
Yeah. Me and Bob just come from was it Carolina? South Carolina?
Yeah, from a little church up there.
Yeah, a little church up there, so on and so forth. We had some feedback from that. But people who team, in my small group, with other people that have read it, some of my friends that are in just different walks of life, whether it's government or whatever else, they found it very, very interesting and begin to say, man, I just did not know. I had a person, I don't want to just necessarily, that was in government, and don't want to call any names, but they have their granddaughter's married to someone, they're white, right? to someone that's black or whatever else, and so on and so forth. And just in this climate of age with different things, you know, people don't want to say the wrong thing or whatever else, this and that there, and they begin to say, man, the conversation that I seen that you and Bob was having in these is very educational, and we just appreciate y'all having this dialogue.
Well, one of the fascinating things for me about this was Jamie gets hooked on crack cocaine, and he's dealing downtown. He's dealing all over the city. Yeah. And at one point, he has a couple of interactions with a young police sergeant named Jerry Salters. Yeah. And so we interview Officer Salters, and it's a fascinating conversation about what a really good police officer tries to do to just manage crime, to make communities safe, and for people that aren't committing crimes to live in, for children to play in safely.
What was your absolute favorite part of doing this book?
Great question. You want to go first?
Yeah, you know, I think my favorite part of doing this was just having conversation with Jamie, and I flipped through the book a few minutes before I came over here, and it's just full of these wonderful stories, and you know, some about my life, but a lot about Jamie's life. And for example, we're sitting at dinner one evening, and I said to Jamie, have you got any tattoos? And Jamie said, yeah, I got one. I said, where'd you get that? He said, I got that at 5. I'm like, you got that at 5? But Jamie said, yeah, that was after we set the jail on fire, and then and I said, whoa, stop. You set the jail on fire?
Oh, so that got to go in the book.
And I said, oh, okay, well, you tell me that story. So, I really enjoyed hearing those stories, and again, it's full of very interesting stories, and then just trying to kind of honestly talk together.
Bob was so intrigued about some of my stories, but guess what was so intriguing to me? Was Bob's stories. Because coming up in college didn't get talked about. Having conversations or in my neighborhood and seeing people saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to college. It's not a if, and, or what, or whatever. You know, I'm going to college, and seeing people who parents are putting them through college. Having, it's really two different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
On the black and white.